Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. We're here in the shop today working on the Willys Jeep and we're doing steering. If you've ever been to a Willys Jeep forum site, then I almost guarantee you've seen Saginaw steering conversion at least 1,000 times. These Willys Jeeps came stock with a raw steering box, which honestly, it just looks like a big sardine can. Bolts up to your frame, the column's non-removable, it's a pain in the butt like when you go to pull the tub off. One of my biggest problems with the stock steering on a Willys Jeep is there's just too many joints and too many connections. Pretty much from day one, your steering is going to have a ton of slop in it. We eliminate all those connections and joints and pieces. I think it's just going to be a lot cleaner and a lot safer, and it's going to perform way better. Okay, so I've literally spent at least 2 months. It's been several weeks. I've spent a long time hunting up all the parts so I can knock this thing out in one go. The ideal is pretty simple. Steering column, steering box, drag link tie rod, and you're done. But there's a lot of little pieces here and there and in between, and there's some clearance things down here we're going to talk about. This is the one part of this conversion I'm going to say is optional, because you don't have to get a new steering column to do a Saginaw steering conversion. You can keep your old steering column and your old steering wheel. It'll look totally stock up here, but you'll have the upgrade in your steering box down here and in your drag link and your tie rod. The steering column I ended up going with is a Deepmotor GM style universal steering column. There's no key in the column. It's got a horn button, turn signals, and hazard lights. It's all built in. It's got a nice little wiring pigtail here, which I'm gonna have to figure out what does what. I'm really happy with this. For the price, it was hard to beat. Hop on eBay and check out the prices on these vintage tilt steering columns now. It's really gotten out of hand. It doesn't even make sense, honestly, to buy them over buying something like this. I believe this is all stainless. It's super clean. It's gonna look really good. For a steering wheel, I've just got one of these Grant steering wheels. This is something, if you go with a new steering column, you can spend whatever you want to on these steering wheels. I went with an affordable one. This one was like 50 bucks, I want to say. I did get the adapter to work with the steering wheel on this column. You can find that on Amazon. If you want part numbers for any of this stuff, I'll try and post them in the description. If I don't, just comment down below and I'll be happy to send y'all those numbers. Now this is a Saginaw steering conversion, so of course I've got to use a Saginaw box. This come off, I want to say like a 77 CJ5, but I've got this one. I've also got the one off that J truck I kept. In the research I did, seems like a lot of people use these and they work out really good. Finally, my steering linkage, my drag link, and my tie rod. We've got some BOM tubing, and I've got a 3/4 Heim Joint Kit from Barnes 4-Wheel Drive. This should be super beefy. If I ever break this, I think I'm gonna have a lot bigger problems than my steering linkage. So your original bracket that holds your column on, you have this bracket here, and then there's one that pinches your steering column like that. I really like this ideal for my GM style one. I think I can make this work with a little modification. The diameter of the Willys steering column bracket is 1 5/8 inches, and then my new steering column is 2 inches, so it's not that far off. It shouldn't be that hard to make the original steering column bracket work with my new GM style steering column. So because there was so little difference in the diameter of the Willys column and the new GM style one, actually just tapping on these with a hammer a little bit opened up the diameter enough to match up. Straighten out the legs just a little bit, but this seemed to work really good. Now, once I got my brackets right where I wanted them, where everything was fitting up good, I made these 2 little spacers, and that's just going to make everything tighten up good and tight. You don't want a big gap between the 2 brackets. You want your bolts tightening up on a good square flat surface. So I'm going to put all this together, get it good and tight, everything square, tack it, take it back apart, finish weld it, and then finally paint it. This is the bracket that's going to hold the steering column at the floor, and then, you know, this will be the one that holds it at the firewall. Now, I could have just ordered 2 of these. I could have hung this under the firewall, something like that. They were a little expensive. I think this was around 30 bucks. And I kind of wanted to try this because I thought it would work. I think this will look good, and it's going to save me some money. So I went ahead, hit these with the wire wheel, got them cleaned up, primed them, painted them. They look really good, so I'm going to go ahead and get all this bolted on and see how it looks. So that all went together really good. My adapter was just right. Steering wheel went on pretty easy. I don't have the little connector to hook up that horn button just yet. I'll have to get a smaller one. Turn signal and the tilt, that all looks good. This is like polished turned aluminum, so pretty good quality on that. The hazard switch though, it is just like plastic, I think. But it's pretty good quality for the price. In order to get this set up just right, before I start doing all my steering linkage down here, I went ahead and threw the seats and a little spoiler there, that center console. We'll talk about that in the future. But I had to put my seats in here, primarily my driver's seat, to make sure that I had this height right before I do all my linkage down there, because I'm probably not going to have any slip joints in this. It's probably just going to be solid connections. Went ahead and threw the passenger seat in though, because I was worried about not being able to get the backs of the seats at the same height. It looks really clean though. I'm really happy with how it's all turning out. So now let's go move on and talk about the steering linkage. Okay, so this steering column has a 1-inch double D on the end of it. And then this U-joint is a 1-inch double D up here and a 3/4 double D down here. And you can see the double D, it's really just like a 3/4 diameter, but it's got 2 flats in it. And the reason I went 1-inch to 3/4 is because conveniently enough, the CJ5 steering shaft is 3/4. So you can just take a grinder or put it in a mill, machine you 2 flats on this, and you can stick it up in that U-joint. I do have the one here. The steering box is going to end up down here on this frame horn. And then I do have another 3/4 to 3/4 in case I need it. This is the steering shaft support. It's probably going to end up like right up in here somewhere. I'll have to build me a tab and stuff. But that'll just keep the shaft supported coming off that U-joint, keep everything nice and square. It's gonna be tight. I've seen people go through this motor mount, and I've seen people go over the top of the frame rail and down. So I'm just gonna kind of figure it out as I go, I think. I'm really probably gonna end up going over the top of that motor mount, keep things straighter, and use this spare U-joint to drop down to the box. So the box is gonna end up mounting something like that right there. This came off a 71 J4000 pickup truck, but it's still Saginaw, and from what I can tell, these are the exact same box. I don't know, the ratio might be a little different, but this one is so much smoother than that one. I really don't know the history on either of these. I know this one is kind of tight, doesn't turn real good. This one's super smooth, and it's got kind of a little drop pitman arm, whereas the CJ5 one is really just a straight arm. So that might help with my steering angle just a little bit on that drag link. I'm gonna go ahead and get this plated up though, get my cardboard out, cut out a plate, and get that all done up. And then I'll show you how I'm gonna mount that steering box to this frame rail. Super easy. So for mounting up the steering box, I went with some 7/16 bushings, and they just mount on the top and bottom of the frame rail. Now mounting it up this high, you are going to have to clearance this cross member. So just using a hole saw, I'm going to drill both sides of this cross member, then make 2 straight cuts, and that'll open it up and give me plenty of clearance for my steering linkage. Now after clearancing out the cross member, you're going to want to plate it back up because you don't want to lose that strength. That is a front cross member. So I took a piece of pipe, cut it down one side, then I pried it open, bent it out into a U shape. This worked really good and made the job really simple getting this all plated back up, and it looks really clean. Now let me show y'all what I've got set up here. I've got my steering box farther to the front than what I was planning on. But if you look at my drag link and my tie rod, they're like perfectly parallel. I've measured this out, so they look really good. The next step here, I kind of want to tack the steering box on to the frame just to hold it in place. I'm probably gonna take my drag link back off, which all this is just temporary. I'm just figuring all this out, doing my measurements. So I failed to mention, for this conversion, I went with the 2-hole knuckle off of that J4000 truck. You don't have to have one of these 2-hole knuckles to do this conversion. You can just run your drag link to your tie rod and it'll do the same thing. I'm gonna set up some pieces of angle on my tires, get everything aligned, and go ahead and make my tie rod and put it on there. Tack all that together. That'll have my wheels where they're supposed to be at. And then I can figure out the clearance between here and my pitman arm as far as where this needs to be at. This might need to come back a little bit more or more towards the front. It also could come forward a little bit more, which would be better. I think I'm gonna go ahead, kind of temporarily weld that, just tack it on. Then I'm gonna take this back off, make that tie rod real quick, and then we'll see where we're at from there. I got all my temporary stuff took back off, and then I'm pretty happy with where this is at. I've got just a little shim under here to keep that from pivoting. Put a little tack down here, just temporary. And then I went ahead and put my Heim joints on. Now with these, you are gonna have to drill your knuckles out to a 5/8 drill bit. It's not too bad. I always hate modifying old parts like this, especially these 2-hole knuckles are a little bit hard to come by. But if I ever wanted to go back stock or put it on a stock Jeep or something, you could always just put a bushing in there. Now that I've got all that done, I measure out my tie rod there. Go ahead and put that on, tack it in place. And I've got these backed out, about a 1/2 inch of adjustment in it, which I might end up going with like 3/8 or something like that. Probably don't need a 1/2 inch. And then once I have that set up, then I can figure out if this drag link's gonna work. Then I can go ahead and start finish welding everything. So I wanted to show y'all what I did here. I made a bunch of marks at 36 1/4, which is what I measured. And then I took a piece of tape and I wrapped all the way around them marks, and that's how I'm gonna try and keep this super straight. Now, if you had like a horizontal bandsaw, that'd be the best way to cut this. It'd probably keep it straighter than anything, but this should work out all right. So I went ahead and pulled this box back off. Had to drill the pitman arm out, another 5/8 hole. This thing was hard as a rock. I don't know what the deal was, but I finally got that hole drilled. Same deal as with the drag link. I measured this all out, made me a bunch of marks, wrapped it, made the cut. And then as far as getting this where I wanted it, so I could check and make sure I could go lock to lock both ways and stuff, plenty of steering left. So at this point, I've got my steering where I want it, I've got my box where it needs to be, and I've got my column where it needs to be. All that's left to do is to figure out my linkage from that point to that point, and I can finish weld all this stuff and my steering will be done. So I've got a piece of 3/4 double D right here, and then this is the stock CJ5 shaft. It's 3/4 diameter, so you can grind flats on it and it'll work with one of these. I've got them kind of crossed right there where I can place my final U-joint, and it'll kind of let me know where I need to cut this at. And I think I'm just going to use this. I should have enough to go all the way up here. That way it all matches. It'll all look the same. And I'll just save this for a future project. Final step, make that cut, get these put together, and we'll have it linked up here to the steering column. This right here is the last piece to the puzzle. Got a little linkage on there. Got this kind of where I want it. What this does is it's going to keep these U-joints in position. So I need to make me up some kind of little tab right here to kind of keep all this where it needs to be at, have some good angles on this stuff, and we can finally turn the wheel and see if all this is going to work. I went ahead and put that last steering shaft support bracket on. Then I took everything back apart, finish welded it, painted it, cleaned it all up, put it back together, and it looks great and it performs great. Something I did change, I got rid of that weird double U-joint thing, went to a single U-joint. That helped out a lot with like some binding issues I was having. And that got me down to 1 steering shaft support bracket instead of 2. I rebuilt the U-joint that came on the CJ5 box, put a new boot on it. That looks all good, got fresh grease in it. I'm really happy with how this Saginaw steering conversion turned out. And like I said, I spent weeks and weeks planning this out, seeing what other people did, researching parts, reading forums, and this is just one way to do it. There's a really great article on this in Flat Fendering Aficionado, which if you've not been buying those, you need to start. There's some really great old school Jeep information in there on how to do projects just like this. But in that article, they show how you can actually do 1 single shaft from the column down to the steering box and just go right through the motor mount. It eliminates that extra U-joint I put in there. Now, one of the reasons I didn't go that route is I wanted my steering box up high, and then I went with an aftermarket column, which changed things a little bit. And also my proportioning valve was kind of in the way of all that. I would have had to remake some brake lines or even maybe move that, which was going to be a whole lot more work than doing the path I went with. I'm really happy I went this route because this also kind of opens up the space in there if I ever did like a small block Chevy conversion or something. I should have plenty of room for that steer not to have to move. I think that's going to be it for this video. I appreciate y'all checking it out. If you got any questions, hit me up down in the comments or go find me over on Instagram at 7bar Salvage. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I'll see y'all next time.